Tonight, on The Wrap, an opportunity to celebrate the shared history of two nations. Breaking news as Buckingham Palace releases details of the King and Queen's state visit to the US, including a meeting with relatives of 9/11 victims, but not Epstein survivors. Also tonight, with 33 children killed in one day of airstrikes by Israel on Lebanon, we have a special report on the youngest and most vulnerable victims of the war. This on the day the first diplomatic talks between Israel and Lebanon take place for 3 decades in Washington. A former NATO chief warns the UK is under-prepared for war. He criticises government defence spending as the military is told to find billions in savings. We got it wrong. An apology from the boss of South East Water after the taps ran dry for a fortnight, affecting more than 20,000 customers. Well, we discussed the day's biggest stories with the journalist and broadcaster, Sonia Soda, and the political commentator, Adam Bolton. Plus, a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers, including the IMF's warning of a setback for the UK economy due to the Iran war. Well, hello and good evening to you, and welcome to Sonia and to Adam. So we begin with breaking news and new details released in the past few minutes about the King and Queen's state visit to the US. The 4-day trip from the 27th to the 30th of April will mark the 250th anniversary of American independence and will involve the monarch addressing Congress, a state dinner and a commemoration of the 25th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. But there will be no meeting with survivors of the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Well, Sonia, Adam, let's talk about this. Epstein aside, this trip couldn't come at a more politically sensitive time.
Yes, indeed. And I have to remember that leader of the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey, said it shouldn't go ahead because of Donald Trump's behaviour. That said, this, from the British point of view, is very much about the relationship between the UK and the US rather than with Donald Trump. I think the question will have to be whether Donald Trump does manage to make it about himself again. We do know there's going to be a meeting between the King and the President in the Oval Office, which sometimes have turned into spectaculars. I wonder if they'll be able to manage that. Also going to be an address to Congress by the King, only the second time a British monarch's done that. Yes,
some extraordinary parts of this. Sonia.
Absolutely. Well, this is not the time when British-American relations have been at their best, shall we say, to put it mildly. So I think the UK government will be looking on this visit as an important opportunity for the King to go over there, maybe smooth some ruffled feathers, Donald Trump's ruffled feathers. There is, of course, as Adam says, the potential for embarrassment, though, for the King. But I suspect Donald Trump, who really has a deep affection for the UK, might be on better behaviour than we've seen of him from late.
Yes, I was going to say, will he be on best behaviour, but better might be a better way of putting it. Well, this is what Buckingham Palace has said about the visit tonight, then. This is celebrating a partnership between two nations and two peoples. It is a relationship that has survived many presidencies and, of course, many reigns, and will no doubt continue to do so long into the future. Well, here is our royal correspondent, Laura Bondup, with more details then.
The risks are high as the King heads stateside. His so-called soft power will be on overdrive as he's hosted by President Trump. So here's what we now know. The King and Queen are spending 4 days in the US, marking the 250th anniversary of American independence. It all kicks off with a welcome by the President and First Lady and an invitation for a private tea. They've all met before, most recently last September for the US state visit hosted at Windsor Castle. The King's going to address Congress too, only the second British monarch to do so, with every word, I'm sure, meticulously written. And there'll be a state dinner at the White House. The royal couple are also heading to New York to commemorate the victims of 9/11, as well as events in Virginia, including a block party. Now, as always, the King doesn't choose where he goes. State visits are at the request of the government. But the timing of this one is really unusual, just months after Trump's UK state visit. And of course, coming at a time of huge tension between the UK and the US. I think the hope is this visit helps stabilise what is now a rocky relationship. But remember, it's also a historic relationship that is perhaps much bigger than personalities. Now, one thing we know, the King and Queen won't be meeting Epstein's victims, despite their pleas. A palace source saying, while they fully understand and appreciate the survivors' position, it simply isn't possible. They can't do anything that could impact ongoing police inquiries. Remember, the King's brother, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, was arrested following the release of the Epstein files. He strongly denies any wrongdoing. It is, though, I think, worth noting that the Queen will be meeting organisations advocating for victims and survivors of abuse during this visit. Now, like I said, there are risks, but the King knows how to handle delicate diplomacy. And he isn't, of course, a political figure, despite being hosted by the world's most powerful political leader. What's interesting is we won't have many opportunities to see or hear the two men together. But President Trump loves the royal family and has huge respect for the institution. He is, though, unpredictable, and that is always a risk. You can be sure, though, that this state visit is going to be carefully choreographed, because I think there is one big area of agreement. Neither side wants the visit to go badly.
Laura, with that update then. So tonight, a Foreign Office spokesman has said this historic state visit will commemorate the United States' 250th anniversary and demonstrate the very best of the UK-US relationship that is central to our shared prosperity and security and our history. The milestone celebrations provide us the opportunity to reflect on the developments of our relationship over 250 years into what is the closest of friendships. Maybe not right now, as Sonia said, but, going back to our history, George III lost the colonies, it's a king going to celebrate the loss of a king of, a large part of our territory.
Yes, it is. And actually, at the bicentennial, the 200th anniversary, there was a very successful visit by the mother of the present King, Queen Elizabeth II. And the fact of the matter is America is born out of British history, if you like, because it was a British colony, and that's something that is always remarked on. So, of course, is being separated by the common language of speaking English. And it's notable that the Queen, Camilla, is taking her interest in reading and encouraging literacy to an event in New York as well.
Yes, that's interesting. And in terms of the palace and in terms of that UK-US relationship, which is clearly the focus, they say you will be aware that the King and Queen have a unique role to play in terms of building alliances even in challenging circumstances. That is the whole strategic objective of state visits. It's for His Majesty to utilise and demonstrate that soft power in action to cement friendships. There we go. And, talking about the history, it is definitely a historic occasion, not least because of the opportunity to address Congress, as Adam was saying. But, soft power in action, Trump on better behaviour, as you put it, what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is even a reception, a soft power reception while they're over there, which really kind of does what it says on the tin, doesn't it? But yeah, I think the government will be really pleased about this sort of briefing coming out of the palace before the King goes across, saying, this is one of the objectives about having a monarchy, building up soft power, building these relationships in ways that perhaps when you've got governments that are clashing over international affairs, political leaders can't in quite the same way. So I think the number 10 will be looking at this and saying, look, this is a real advantage we've got here, the fact that Trump loves the monarchy, he loves sort of some of the history and pomp and circumstance over the UK, and actually this is a diplomatic card that we can use, hopefully, to our advantage.
And they're also going to be marking the 25th anniversary of 9/11. Yeah. And important to remember that I think it's still the greatest loss of British life in a terrorist action. So, it's British people being commemorated as well, although, of course, it was turned out 9/11 to be the gateway to the Iraq War, where many people now feel that the special relationship went too far.
Very interesting. Thank you very much indeed. Well, in a moment, we will have the latest on the first direct talks between Israel and Lebanon in 30 years. The spillover, of course, of the Iran conflict, which is part of the falling out between Sir Keir Starmer and Donald Trump. But first, let's take a look at why those talks are taking place. 33 children were killed and more than 150 injured in last Wednesday's airstrikes by Israel on Lebanon. Our special correspondent, Alex Crawford, reports on the youngest and most vulnerable victims of that war.
She moves her fingers as she recognises her nurse's voice. But with nearly half her body burned in an Israeli airstrike, any movement at all is painful. Her name is Zainab. She's only 12, and her entire family was killed in the same attack she barely survived. She still doesn't know that her parents and 2 young siblings have all been killed. Her brother was 5. Her baby sister wasn't quite 2 years old. Zainab constantly asks for her mother. Her only 2 visitors are her aunt and uncle, and they can't bring themselves to tell her the brutal truth right now.
All civilian. They bomb. Why? No one knows. They're not fighting. He doesn't have any bomb. He doesn't make any bad thing for anyone. If I was in our house, she's alone. She's alone. We are the only family. This is very bad issue. Yeah.
The sole survivor in just one family affected is still critically ill and not out of danger yet. This has been a particularly deadly war for children. Sometimes it's hard to grasp statistics, but 33 children were killed in just one day's airstrikes. 166 have been killed in the past 6 weeks since the latest flare-up, since the beginning of March, and 650 have been left badly wounded or hurt. These are some of the faces of those killed in the 10-minute Israeli military rampage across Lebanon last Wednesday. The number of women, the number of families, the number of child fatalities stands out. Many of the children suffered crush injuries. Both the legs of this 11-year-old boy were broken when his home collapsed around him. But that wasn't all. A 3D scan shows how his jaw is shattered too. He's lost some of his front teeth. The dark line you see in the chin area is the break in his jaw and mouth, which will need to be knitted together so that he can eat again. The Israeli military insists it's targeting Hezbollah militants, but the medics in Lebanon say the numbers of children hurt and killed are abnormally high.
If you compare it to the Russia-Ukraine war, less than 1% of the casualties in Ukraine are actually children. In Gaza, if you're looking at just fatalities, the most recent study showed that 30% of the fatalities are children. In Lebanon to date, we're around 14% of the casualties are children. So this kind of gives you a reflection of how discriminatory, in spite of having such technology and weaponry that can really precisely assassinate, execute specific combatants, but at the same time, you're seeing this high civilian mass casualty rate.
You can see the dust and the gravel inside the wounds.
A British Palestinian surgeon is caring for many of the wounded children.
So if you look on the side, that collection on the left, that's the blood collecting.
One of his patients is a 9-month-old baby whose bedroom wall exploded onto her. Her head injuries led to blood building up and pressing on her brain.
You need to open up into the head and evacuate the blood.
And that sounds quite dangerous for a young child.
It is very dangerous for a young child. And one of the most disturbing things is at the hospital, because we treat war-wounded children, not just in this war, in the previous war. We now have the world's largest cohort of traumatic brain injury in children as a result of war.
The baby's mother has asked we don't identify her, but she shares pictures of her wounded little girl. The young couple with their first baby had already fled their home and were in a friend's apartment when a bomb brought down the wall, burying their daughter.
I stand up, my husband came, we started searching for her. Of course, all the other people with us came to search for her. She was under the I don't like to remember. She was under the rocks, and they pulled her. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. My husband ran with her, and he took her to the nearest hospital.
This war has hit Lebanon's young in shockingly high numbers, killing or injuring around 20 children every day since early March, and leaving a legacy of suffering. Alex Crawford, Sky News, Lebanon.
The distressing scenes of conflict there, certainly. Well, in Washington today, there have been talks and talks about talks, but little hope of a ceasefire between Israel and the Iran-backed militant group Hezbollah. The Israeli and Lebanese ambassadors were at the talks, which were the first direct negotiations between the nations since 1993. And while there was no agreement to end the fighting, there was some positivity, with Israel claiming both sides were united in their words, liberating Lebanon from Hezbollah. So let's bring in our US correspondent, Mark Stone. Mark, we saw Alex's report there, the genuine horrors of war on the youngest of children. You understand the cries for a ceasefire. What positivity can be gleaned from today, then, especially as Hezbollah is not at the table?
Yeah, they're not, and nor would they ever be at the table. But the Lebanese government was, in the form of their ambassador to Washington, and the Israeli government was their ambassador to Washington. And at the head of the table was the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. And that is significant. Here they are. There was no handshake. The Lebanese ambassador, second right, and the Israeli ambassador, far right. No handshake between them. But they were there in the same room around the same table, and that is significant. The Lebanese, look, Yalda spoke to one of the Lebanese ministers earlier on today, and his broad point was, look, we could have done this a long time ago if only the Israelis were willing to sit round a table with us, but they weren't, and now they are. The Lebanese government, this new Lebanese government, in power since January 2025, has been willing has been saying publicly it wants to disarm Hezbollah, it wants to get rid of Hezbollah, but it needs time and it needs help, and it also needs the Israelis not to continually bomb in Lebanon. And yet, over the past week, that bombing, as Alex viscerally showed in her reporting, has been really, really intense. In fact, so intense that I think it was the intervention of President Trump who said to the Israelis, back off a bit because you're upsetting the prospects of a deal, my deal in Iran. Back off a bit, and why don't you get round a table with the Lebanese government? Maybe we can find some peace there, as is the president's way, and it's happened. Don't assume that we're going to get white smoke very quickly. We're not. This is ambassadorial level, but it's a start. And I got a sense, certainly from the Israelis when we spoke to them today, that some might say it's disingenuous because they're still bombing in Lebanon. They're still in southern Lebanon. Netanyahu went to southern Lebanon, stood on Lebanese territory just, I think it was yesterday. So they're still doing all that, but they are talking about peace as well. That is important. Have a listen to the exchange.
That's the change that President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu have brought across the region. With the degrading of Iran, this malign and malignant entity that's trying to destabilize the entire region, there is now the opportunity to degrade its proxies as well, to move them out of their horrific occupation of another country and to move into an era where Lebanese and Israelis can live side by side in peace. And yes, vacation in each other's countries. It's not a pipe dream. It's a reality that can really happen in our lifetime.
But when will you stop? When will you cease fire? When will you stop fighting in Lebanon? When will you stop firing missiles at the Lebanese civilian infrastructure? I guess that's their question.
I want to push back on your question. Okay. Israelis don't wake up in the morning and look to fire missiles across the border. The missiles are being fired at our civilians. That will be put a stop to. We will not allow a terror organization to continually fire missiles into our population centers.
Yes, and you talked about the conflict continuing. The Lebanese Health Ministry is certainly suggesting that 35 people have been killed in Lebanon today. But while I've got you, Mark, at the top of our show was new details released by the Palace and the Foreign Office about the state visit. You and I have had plenty of discussions about the difficulties for Sir Keir Starmer with the current attitude of President Trump. You know, we're speculating on whether he'll be on better behaviour, Mr. Trump, but there are pitfalls ahead, certainly for the King and Queen on this visit at the end of the month.
Yeah, there are, but I think the president, if there is one leader in the whole world who he will not want to embarrass, it is King Charles and his wife, Queen Camilla. And so I think in that sense, the jeopardy for the king is relatively low. But I think it's also perfectly possible that while the king is here, the president could have a few more jabs at the prime minister. So it is awkward. You know, there have been times over the past few weeks where I have wondered whether this trip would go ahead at all, or whether they'd actually find some manoeuvre, some way of saying, look, we're going to postpone it, the war's happening, or this, that, or the other, but find a way to just push it to the right a little bit, because it is awkward. The king is not here because he wants to come. He may want to come. Who knows what he's thinking? But he's here because he's been asked to come by Keir Starmer, by Downing Street. And as Adam was saying earlier, I think, and the sense I've got so much in the background over the past few weeks, what diplomats are saying to me, reminding me is, OK, the special relationship is under a bit of strain at the moment. OK, the president and the prime minister, while they did get on, don't seem to get on quite so well at the moment, or there's a bit of noise, shall we say. But this isn't about one president and one prime minister. It's about one country and another country. It's about that special relationship. It's about Britain and America. And if you look at what they're doing, Anna, I think that is a reflection of that, because there's going to be a garden party in the grounds of the Lutyens mansion on Mass Avenue, that is the Massachusetts Avenue, that is the British Embassy, a spectacular building, possibly the nicest embassy in Washington. And that garden party is going to be you know, they're going to host the great and the good, they hope, at that party. And then the next morning, their majesties will go to the White House. Then there will be a joint address to Congress up here at Capitol Hill. That'll be a moment for sure. And in the evening, the state banquet. And then they're going to go to New York. There'll be stuff there. And then I think it's really interesting. They're going to go to the countryside in Virginia, just where King Charles likes to be, where Queen Camilla likes to be as well. So I think that for them will be the most comfortable part of this, probably the most comfortable part for the British government as well, because he'll be far away from politics and Washington. And Queen Camilla is going to, I think it's probably going to be somewhere like Middleburg, because she's going to visit the horse racing industry of the United States. If it is Middleburg, well, you could not find a more quintessentially British place in America. Middleburg, Virginia. I've been there a lot of times. You feel like you're walking down a high street in the UK there. So they'll feel at home there. It'll be a moment for sure. But to answer your question, I don't think the president is going to have any interest in embarrassing the king and the queen. But surrounding it, of course, there will be jeopardy.
Fascinating stuff. Mark, really appreciate that. It's an embassy that Adam knows well, just to say. You sold it beautifully. So there we go.
No, well, his famous last words that Trump won't embarrass him after all, he's prepared to embarrass the Pope and Jesus, you know. So King Charles, but we'll have to see. But, I mean, of course, it's a very, very big moment for Peter
I think he's trying to... Go on then, go Mark.
Yeah, Peter Mandelson's replacement.
I was just going to say, Adam, I was going to say, for President Trump, King Charles is well above the Pope.
That's a controversial statement on its own, actually, to be fair. Yes, they've still been rumbling on, haven't they? There you go. It's all about the British monarchy. Mark, thank you very much indeed. Let's go back to Lebanon, shall we? We've seen those, you know, an extraordinary report again from Alex Crawford, the talks that are beginning in Washington, at least, to try and end this war, whether, you know, Trump told Netanyahu to take part or not. Nonetheless, this is all part of the fracturing of the Middle East right now, which is still developing, is it not, in terms of you know, the Strait of Hormuz, Lebanon, and elsewhere?
Totally, and I think that report from Alex Crawford really illustrated the terrible human cost of Israel's action in Lebanon right now. Israel would say, well, we are being attacked every day by Hezbollah, so this is action in our own self-defence. But it feels like we're really having a repeat of some of the conversations that we had about Gaza, which is there are questions about proportionality. Why are so many innocent civilians getting caught up in this? Why so many children, as we heard in that report? And I'm afraid you look at kind of a prime minister like Benjamin Netanyahu. He's in government, in coalition with far rights of the elements of the Israeli political establishment, and it doesn't feel like his government is exercising any restraint at the moment. And I think some of the questions that we heard posed from people who are running Lebanon, you know, it's a new government since January 2025. We've been willing to talk. We want to get rid of Hezbollah as well, and we want to work with people and partners in order to do that. Why couldn't those conversations have happened before we've seen some of this intervention?
On your first point, you know, the Israelis' viewpoint is obviously that Hezbollah hides amongst civilians, and that's why, you know, that there's the targeting.
Yeah, but it's also true, I think, that there were not attacks until Israel and the US attacked Iran this time round.
But they were subject to a ceasefire, weren't they? That was the point.
I mean,
that's what they're trying to restore.
When the ceasefire was first announced, there was an assumption that that would include the US and Israel and the operation in Lebanon. It then transpired that the Israelis were not going to stop, so the Americans then revised their position and said, well, it was never part of the ceasefire deal. Now you've got, you know, it is a big obstruction to reaching any deal with the Iranians if it's there. What is also interesting is that, you know, in this, who's the favourite son of Donald Trump, J.D. Vance has been given the hospital pass of trying to get the Iranians to the table, whereas, and he's been doing that with Kushner and Witkoff, these two businessmen who Trump uses for a lot of his diplomacy. But the proper diplomat, the Secretary of State, Rubio, has got possibly the rather more fertile task of trying to broker something between Israel and Lebanon.
Yes, and just on the Strait of Hormuz, one development this evening is that the US will revive full sanctions on Iranian oil this weekend. It was a 30-day waiver on sanctions in order, do you remember, to get the global oil supply moving. That will expire, but it will not be renewed. There will be no point renewing it, of course, when the US is itself trying to blockade the very ships, the Iranian ships, or the ships carrying Iranian oil, rather, leaving through the Strait of Hormuz. So what would the point be of having those sanctions lifted?
Well, quite. And I think this is just a hint of the further economic pain that is yet to come.
Yes.
And you've got to remember there's the IMF meeting happening in Washington at the moment. And a lot of the finance ministers going and making no secret of the fact that they blame the Americans for the downward turn in the economy, which the IMF is reporting, including
one Rachel Reeves.
Front page of the Mirror.
Yeah.
No exit plan, no idea. Chancellor blasts the US over the Iran war shambles and economic.
And you have promoted very carefully, Adam, that at 10:30 we'll be taking a full look at all the newspapers. Or in fact, at this rate, it might be just after 10:30, actually. Let us talk about something else, though, for now, which is all related. The former Defence Secretary and NATO Chief Lord Robertson has warned that the UK is underprepared for war, accusing the government of corrosive complacency when it comes to defence spending. He says the country's national security is in peril and Britain cannot be defended with an ever-expanding welfare budget.
There is a corrosive complacency today in Britain's political leadership. Lip service is paid to the risks, the threats, the bright red signals of danger. But even the promised national conversation about defence can't be started. The cold reality of today's dangerous world is that we cannot defend Britain with an ever-expanding welfare budget.
well, he's the man who's been looking into our defensive capabilities and what needs to be done, and he's saying, show me the money.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's the person who presented the defence review with Keir Starmer, where Keir Starmer said it was a brilliant piece of work and he would accept all of it, but he hasn't come up with the money to fund the implications of what they said. Incidentally, the other two co-authors, former senior General Barrons and also Fiona Hill, the defence expert, have both come out and backed George Robertson and saying that the UK lacks urgency in defending itself.
And then at the same time, I think it was Sky who broke the story this morning that the heads of all the armed forces have been asked to find £3.5 billion of efficiency savings this year. That's a very tough ask when you're asking the country to be on a war footing, as Keir Starmer has said he wants us to be.
And you're trying to send vessels towards the eastern Mediterranean and provide Ukraine with weapons. Exactly. Lots more still to come in the next part of our programme. We will take a first look at what is making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers, including what Adam was talking about, those concerns from the IMF about the impact of the Iran war on the UK economy and fears of a global recession.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off.
And make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out! What more do you need?
Well, it is time now to see what is making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. Let's start with the Daily Mail, which carries the words from Lord Robertson's warning that Britain can't defend itself with an ever-expanding welfare bill. Despite that warning, Rachel Reeves only plans to raise defence spending by £2.5 billion a year. That is the lead story for The Times. No exit plan, no idea is the Mirror's splash tomorrow as the Chancellor blasts, to use the paper's words, Donald Trump over the war in Iran. The Guardian reports on the global recession fears of the International Monetary Fund, which also said the UK could be the hardest hit in the G7. The UK economy takes a triple hit from the Iran war. That's the lead story for The Eye. Wall Street bank earnings shatter records as traders thrive on Iran war volatility. That's the front page of the Financial Times. Labour are set to lose control of Wales, the Telegraph claims. The Express calls on the Prime Minister to do more for emergency workers injured in the line of duty. The Metro quotes the boss of the Royal Ballet and Opera, thanking actor Timothée Chalamet for saying no one cares about the two art forms. Apparently the backlash was so widespread it has done wonders for ticket sales. Who Wants to Be a Billionaire? That is on the front page of The Sun as plans for a mega jackpot are revealed. And The Star has a story on sex positivity in Westminster. So let's kick off with what the IMF had to say about the global economy and indeed about the UK. Which was not good news for the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves.
Really not good news. So the IMF is predicting, and it follows similar predictions from the OECD in recent days, that the UK is going to be one of the worst hit wealthy countries economically as a result of conflict in Iran. And I think the reason for this is because of the fact that we are very, very dependent on global oil prices, because from an energy security perspective, we're not producing enough of our own energy, and the price that consumers pay is very much set by global prices. But what the IMF has said is that this is going to result in a triple hit to the economy. It's going to hit the cost of living. It's going to hit
Which is
jobs.
The front page of The Eye while you're
Absolutely,
talking. Carry on,
It's going to hit the cost of living, it's going to hit jobs, and it's going to hit growth. And this is literally the worst package of news that I think the Chancellor could get, because the problem with the British economy, even before this conflict took place, was growth is too low, living standards have been stagnant over the last 20 years, and tax revenues are not going up. So, you know, the chance that the government's promise to us was elect us, we'll sort out economic growth, tax revenues will go up and we will sort out your public services for you. That is not happening. And actually now, to be fair, not through any fault of the governments, these are international events, but we are moving backwards on that.
I mean, you say that, but business would certainly say they've been given a rocky position.
No, that's,
with
fair enough.
Multiple changes.
Yes.
No, but this reversal, which is, it has to be said, is a global reversal, according to the IMF, including food prices on the front of the FT, is not a fault of the government. You can argue that they haven't put themselves in a great position with their straitjacket of no tax rises and taxes that they've imposed on business instead. But it is just one of those unfortunate things, and Ed Conway, as ever, has done a brilliant graphic explainer of this, is that the UK economy is particularly vulnerable because it not only has higher than desirable inflation and higher costs of borrowing by the government, but as Sonia was saying, we've got this dependency on energy prices. So we've been hit by a triple whammy, which other economies have not been hit so hard, although it should also be said that the revising down of growth estimates for next year from 1.3% to 0.8% actually puts the UK pretty much in the middle of the pack as far as growth next year is concerned. It's not dramatically worse than Germany or France.
Which is something that needs maybe to be looked into. We've got variable rate mortgages, so people are instantly hit with changes in interest rates. We've got high indebtedness, and we don't have nuclear. Yeah. So those are multiple factors as well.
Indeed.
That are specifically impacting the UK.
This is going to be politically so difficult for the government, because voters aren't going to say, oh, well, you know, Germany's doing quite badly as well and we're only a bit behind them. they're going to be saying, well, look, I voted for a Labour government. They promised me things were going to get better. And actually, things aren't getting better. And the cost of living crisis feels like it's getting worse.
Yeah,
and that is politically toxic.
Two things the government promised were growth and the cost of living. And both of those are going in the wrong direction, in part because of what's happened in the
Or I meant to say,
Gulf.
we do have nuclear, but we decided under the moratorium by Tony Blair not to expand it like other nations have. Just quickly, we saw the Chancellor slams Trump. The quotes are all over The Guardian as well. Speaking before travelling to Washington for those IMF meetings, she said to start a conflict without being clear what the objectives are and not being clear about how you're going to get out of it, I do think that is a folly. In fact, The Guardian's quoting the Daily Mirror, to be fair. She added, I feel very frustrated and angry that the US went into this war without a clear exit plan, without a clear idea of what they were trying to achieve, etc., etc. So that's
it's interesting because I think ministers have really
go.
sharpened up their language on Trump. It's not just Rachel Reeves. We saw Wes Streeting do that on Sky News on Sunday morning. We've seen Keir Starmer himself sort of be a bit punchier about Trump. I think it's quite obvious now that the government are in local election campaigning mode and they know Donald Trump is not popular with British voters, and I think that's why they're being stronger in calling out what he's done.
Yeah, and in the meantime, with a squeeze on growth, the need, therefore, for more people to get more help often, where do you get the money for defence? Which takes us to what Lord Robertson had to say in an address tonight, and then what Rachel Reeves has apparently answered to that, which is being reported in the Times newspaper. Anna.
Yeah, she's very much stuck to her guns. There's a lot of talk about the Treasury not understanding defence, and I think Lord Robertson had some rude words about the Treasury in his speech tonight. Yet Rachel Reeves sticking to it. The estimate is that there is even on present spending plans, there's a £28 billion shortfall in the defence budget over the next 3 years, and it turns out that Rachel Reeves says that she's only going to fill that up by £10 billion. So that will mean, as we were hearing this morning on Sky News, that will mean at a time when politicians are saying we need a stronger defence, it will mean cuts in defence.
Yes, Sam Coates and Deborah Haynes reporting. It's actually written up in the Times as well. Defence chiefs are meeting this week to discuss cuts for this financial year. They are in the region of £3.5 billion, sources told Sky News.
I would make a prediction that if things go as badly as we expect for Labour, in the local elections, that Rachel Reeves will be the head that will roll over everything, and that would give Starmer the opportunity, if he's so inclined, to actually do something about the defence budget.
Adam.
You heard it first here.
It's me. Quick look at the Daily Mail on our way through. We cannot defend Britain with an ever-expanding welfare bill. Labour attempted to cut welfare. Do the new cohort of Labour MPs, who are perhaps looking at one term now, are they not bending on this, do you think? Or is there a chance to go back and look at welfare again?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, there's welfare, benefits, but these are the words of Geoffrey Robinson, former New Labour minister. Robertson, sorry, so apologies. And he's sort of picking on welfare. The thing I would say is politicians won't touch it because they find it so politically difficult. But one thing we should be talking about is a triple lock on pensions, because the result of the triple lock on pensions is that the basic state pension goes up faster than earnings and faster than inflation. So it ratchets up above those two measures. Now, for a time, that needed to happen because the basic state pensions value had been eroded so much since, the 1990s. But it's now at a good proportion of average earnings. And at some point, a politician's going to have to be brave enough to say, look, it should just go up in line with earnings. We don't need this triple lock that actually sends it increasing beyond that. You could save a lot of money by doing that. That is the first place I would look, not benefits, because at the moment we've got really high levels of child poverty in this country. If you cut welfare and benefits for in-work parents, it's children who are going to suffer.
But the other problem, of course, is that there's no sign at all that the present Parliamentary Labour Party is in any mood to cut benefits. They've already had the reverse on winter fuel. They've already had the reverse on the two-child benefit cap. Indeed, The Sun on its front page says that there have been 63,000 more claimants of universal credit since the election.
Well, I was going to pick up on the Sun for its light relief, actually. Who wants to be a billionaire? The lottery operator. Oh, look, it's the wrong way round. That's great. Can we see it anyway? It's just quite funny. Sorry, there we go. Anyway, we'll write it. We will write it for the next part of our programme. Anyway, I'm going to tell you. Anyway, you probably heard this already. You probably want light relief like me. There's a mega jackpot. They've done a deal with the American lottery operators. You could win $1 billion. It'll be paid out over many years, though, because it's too much money to handle. And also, they're going to double the number of lotto millionaires. Read that at your will, the right way round.
Yes, that's one answer to the cost of living.
It's the new owners,
for a small
isn't
handful.
It? Called Allwyn, who've taken over from Camelot running the lottery.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, getting headlines as well.
But it won't, I'll tell you one thing, it won't be Allwyn. It'll be some win.
Yeah. Now, let's move on, shall we? Because the boss of South East Water has admitted his company failed its customers after recent outages left tens of thousands without drinking water. 24,000 households, if you remember, in Kent and Sussex had supply problems back in November and December before thousands more were hit by further issues in January. Well, in a statement, the chief executive of South East Water, David Hinton, said, "We apologise unreservedly to all our customers for the unacceptable water outages experienced in December and January. We recognise the serious impact this has had on our customers and know that we fell short of what is expected of us. In recognition of this, I have made the decision not to accept any bonus for the 25-26 year. We're taking direct action to change the way supply interruptions are managed through a programme of engineering works and accelerated operational changes." But in spite of that apology, Mr Hinton remained ebullient. Watch this exchange.
Someone once described to me that South East Water is a good company with a really big interruptions problem, and I think is a good company with a really big interruptions problem. So we are often described as poor.
Saying that BA are a really good aircraft carrier. They can't get off the ground.
The operation was a success, but the patient died.
Was there complacency there, do you think, in what he said?
I think massive complacency. I've spent quite a lot of time in Sussex and Kent region, and it truly shocking. I mean, it wasn't just actually December and January where there have been problems with water supply. There's been a hosepipe ban. They haven't built any facilities, new reservoirs, and of course they've got the same problem that everyone's got of sewage in water. I mean, you know, if you wanted to have one thing to summarise what some people call broken Britain, it would be the state of water in this country, which, as we all know, is a wet island.
Yeah, well, indeed it is, yeah. Rain all winter and still a number of hosepipe bans. What needs to be done about it? Sorry to make a really bold... Why have we got dirty rivers, chalk streams polluted?
Gosh, I mean, how long have you got, Anna? No, well, I do think when you take a step, because there's obviously particular issues with this country and consumers in that region that have had a particularly bad experience. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the structure of our water industry and privatisation, and the way that privatisation was done. You've got these companies that have been asset stripped, many of them by private equity. They're paying out huge dividends to the people who own them. They've got a lot of debt, and they haven't been investing in our water infrastructure.
But nor does the state want to invest, and that's the problem, isn't it?
Before
where does money come from?
privatisation, there was a higher rate of investment. That's the fact.
Yeah. And our
even with the modern demands now, will we get higher rainfall?
Our infrastructure is Victorian. I mean, it just hasn't kept pace, and these companies have been allowed to get away with it. And if you're going to privatise, OK, but you've got to have structures that ensure that there is adequate investment and that money just isn't being taken out and paid to very wealthy people.
Also, I have to say, that bloke Hinton has been hauled before the Select Committee. He was completely invisible during the crises in Tunbridge Wells and other area, East Grinstead, over the Christmas period. He didn't speak at all. He sent out a young woman spokesman to speak on behalf of the company. So it's a good thing that he's been hauled in front of the committee.
Yes, and not taking his bonuses. Lots more still to come.
Well, why have you ever considered for one?
Don't ask me.
And I bet you he's still compensated very handsomely in terms of his base rate of pay.
400 grand.
Oh, well, there you go. That's good knowledge.
Still to come. Large crowds greet Harry and Meghan in Australia as they get their 4-day visit underway.
we've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Over there, to your left. There have been airstrikes every day. Hezbollah are very sensitive about us showing any pictures, and we're being hurried away right now. It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon. Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes. Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city, where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. It's trying to hit us. That's it. It got us then. There's a lot of action going on, a lot of hits going in still. We were the first journalists and the only outsiders to reach the site of the attack several weeks after it happened.
We found from the missile.
It's very difficult to see what around here could be conceived of as a legitimate military target. Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, a boat seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world. Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Oh! Getting up close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They will be allowed to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist...
Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off and make a statement.
What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out! What more do you need?
Well, we started the hour talking about the royals, and that's how we end. Large crowds have welcomed the Duke and Duchess of Sussex at the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne, their first stop on their visit to Australia. Well, Harry and Meghan will meet several charities on their privately funded tour before taking part in commercial engagements. So, Adam, what exactly does that mean, a commercial engagement?
Well, it means basically they're pay-per-view, if you want to put it that way. Harry is giving a speech, and people are going to have to buy their tickets for that. And there's also an opportunity, I think it's a wellness day with Meghan, where she, I think, was charging over £1,000 for people to come and spend that day, well, for women to spend that day with her. So they are trying to make some money out of this, but they were a popular couple when they did a tour in Australia shortly after their marriage, and they are, use the word commercial, they're certainly looking into commercial opportunities. In fact, there's one day when Meghan hasn't got any public engagements, and it's thought that she will be exploring business opportunities.
Very interesting. It makes the front page of the Times, doesn't it? Which looks, you know, like they're very popular still. You said they were, but it looks like they still have a lot of people there. The Mail, in its wisdom, has actually counted up the cost of Meghan's outfit, and I'm presuming these are US dollars.
Is it one outfit or several?
This outfit, that outfit you can see, they say the Duchess's outfit for the first day of her tour was worth about $52,000.
A cost? I'm not sure it's worth it.
Atom.
I mean, no outfit's going to be worth $52,000, let's face it, right? I mean, it's eye-watering, some of
But this is what happens when you're no longer quite a member of the royal family. You've got to make your own money, right?
Well, this is the thing. It's a far cry from the official state visits that they did as working royals, where it would all be about visiting charities and giving speeches on behalf of the British state. And, you know, to be fair to them, they've retired from that. Well, now they've taken a step back. I think the issue with them is they sort of want to have their cake and eat it, don't they? So they want to be private, they want to be left alone by the press, but then they do also love the media attention in some ways, and it's kind of hard just to take the good bits out of it without dropping the bad and the ugly, and I sort of feel that that's what they want to do. I think if they genuinely wanted to be outside of the public eye, they wouldn't be quite so showy as this.
No, I'm just going to update myself. $52,000 includes, you're looking at me, includes a watch which was thought to have belonged to the late Princess Diana, which sells for $48,000 new, though Meghan's would likely be priceless. So I'm going to uprate my figure of $52,000 if indeed.
Worth $4,000.
Yeah, OK, that makes a bit more. Yeah, I was like
$12.50.
But she might be being sponsored, of course. The designer may have been.
Exactly, in the influencer world that they now potentially inhabit. But we'll watch that for the next 4 days, shall we? Why not? But we come back with the breaking news tonight, more details from the Palace and the Foreign Office about the upcoming state visit of the King and Queen to America, including a stop at the site of 9/11, no meeting with Epstein survivors, what is described as a historic address to Congress, a meeting you were talking about in the Oval Office. We'll talk more about that and obviously the talks that have been underway today in Washington between Lebanon and Israel. Back with more from the wrap in just a moment.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect.
Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking,
thank you so much,
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They will be allowed to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Tonight on The Wrap, an opportunity to celebrate the shared history of two nations. Buckingham Palace releases new details of the King and Queen's state visit to the US, including a meeting with relatives of 9/11 victims, but not Epstein survivors. Also tonight, with 33 children killed in one day of airstrikes by Israel and on Lebanon, we have a special report on the youngest and most vulnerable victims of the war. This on the day the first diplomatic talks between Israel and Lebanon take place for 3 decades in Washington. When NATO chief warns the UK is underprepared for war, he criticises government defence spending as the military is told to find billions in savings. And a fresh setback to the economy as the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, slashes growth forecasts in the UK by more than any other G7 nation. Well, we discussed today's biggest stories with the journalist and broadcaster, Sonia Soda, and the political commentator, Adam Bolton, plus a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers, including the IMF's warning of a setback for the UK economy due to the Iran war. Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to Sonia and Adam. We begin with news that only broke in the past hour. More details have been released about the King and Queen's state visit to the US. It's a 4-day trip from the 27th to the 30th of April and will mark the 250th anniversary of American independence, involving the monarch addressing Congress, a state dinner, a commemoration of the 25th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, but no meeting with survivors of the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Well, Sonia, Adam, Epstein aside, of course, this trip does genuinely come at a politically sensitive time.
It really does, and I think there'll be those in the government and in Number 10 who hope that the King will go forth for this trip and will help smooth some ruffled feathers. Obviously, relations are not the best they've ever been, I think it's fair to say, between the White House and Number 10 now. But Donald Trump reputedly loves the King, loves the monarchy, so it could be a good visit from that perspective.
Yes, it's interesting that the Foreign Office is saying, well, this is about the relationship going back 250 years between the US and the UK, and that in that time, they say there have been many presidents and many monarchs. So, of course, the message is they hope this is not going to be about Donald Trump. Whether it stays that way, given Donald Trump's preponderance for publicity, we shall have to see. I would also say, just on that Epstein, no meeting on the what's been briefed in advance. If there is a meeting, I would be very surprised that they would brief it in advance. There has been some speculation following the First Lady Melania statement last week about the Epstein crisis and what the King and Queen have said about Epstein, that they might do a joint thing, perhaps with Camilla and Melania. I don't think they would announce that in advance if they do.
Although, to be fair, the palace points out you will be aware of His Majesty's clear constitutional position, not least with regards to the judicial process. And clearly, you know, people have been arrested as part of that investigation. In the meantime, should we have a look at what Buckingham Palace has had to say about it? This is what they've said tonight. This visit celebrating a partnership between two nations and two peoples. It is a relationship that has survived many presidencies and, of course, many reigns, and will no doubt continue to do so long into the future. So let's hear then from our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock.
The risks are high as the King heads stateside. His so-called soft power will be on overdrive as he's hosted by President Trump. So here's what we now know. The King and Queen are spending 4 days in the US, marking the 250th anniversary of American independence. It all kicks off with a welcome by the President and First Lady and an invitation for a private tea. They've all met before, most recently last September for the US state visit hosted at Windsor Castle. The King's going to address Congress too, only the second British monarch to do so, with every word, I'm sure, meticulously written. And there'll be a state dinner at the White House. The royal couple are also heading to New York to commemorate the victims of 9/11, as well as events in Virginia, including a block party. Now, as always, the King doesn't choose where he goes. State visits are at the request of the government. But the timing of this one is really unusual, just months after Trump's UK state visit. And of course, coming at a time of huge tension between the UK and the US. I think the hope is this visit helps stabilise what is now a rocky relationship. But remember, it's also a historic relationship that is perhaps much bigger than personalities. Now, one thing we know, the King and Queen won't be meeting Epstein's victims, despite their pleas. A palace source saying, while they fully understand and appreciate the survivors' position, it simply isn't possible. They can't do anything that could impact ongoing police inquiries. Remember, the King's brother, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, was arrested following the release of the Epstein files. He strongly denies any wrongdoing. It is, though, I think, worth noting that the Queen will be meeting organisations advocating for victims and survivors of abuse during this visit. Now, like I said, there are risks, but the King knows how to handle delicate diplomacy. And he isn't, of course, a political figure, despite being hosted by the world's most powerful political leader. What's interesting is we won't have many opportunities to see or hear the two men together. But President Trump loves the royal family and has huge respect for the institution. He is, though, unpredictable, and that is always a risk. You can be sure, though, that this state visit is going to be carefully choreographed, because I think there is one big area of agreement. Neither side wants the visit to go badly.
So let's take a look at the Foreign Office and what they've had to say tonight. This historic state visit will commemorate the United States' 250th anniversary and demonstrate the very best of the UK-US relationship that is central to our shared prosperity and security and our history. The milestone celebrations provide us the opportunity to reflect on the developments of our relationship over 250 years into what is the closest of friendships. Closest to friendships, except for now, Adam, because Sir Keir Starmer has taken quite the battering from Trump over the Iran conflict.
Yes, he has. And I think the protocol is on a state visit that the monarch, who is, after all, the head of state, so the equivalent to the president, will be accompanied by the Foreign Secretary. And I imagine Yvette Cooper will be going on this visit. And, you know, it may be that Trump will take a few shots at her. I mean, who knows if she comes into range. But I think the truth is he did behave himself when he came over, more or less, on the second state visit. So the chances are that it'll pass without incident.
Yeah, and a lot of this is about soft power. What we're hearing from the palace is that that the King and Queen have a unique role to play in terms of building alliances, even in challenging circumstances. And they pick out, you know, what are historic parts of this visit, including the opportunity to address Congress, which I think, Adam, you were saying the Queen did in 1991. So, I mean, that, you know, that is quite a moment as well, isn't it?
Oh, I think it will be, absolutely. And I should say that I think that the respect for the monarchy in the US goes beyond President Trump. And there'll be many members of Congress who will feel very honoured to sit there and listen to the King in a sort of joint session of Congress. So I think that statement from the palace, it was quite the euphemism, wasn't it, when it talked about, you know, even in difficult circumstances, something similar than that. Of course, what that is hinting at is the fact that relationships between the US and the UK, they're not the best that they've ever been. There's been considerable fallout from the US decision to launch strikes in Iran, the UK's decision that it was only going to let the US use its bases for defensive strikes, not for active strikes. We've sort of picked a position much closer to our European allies on that. So it is a difficult environment. And in fact, and I think we're going to come on to talk about it later in the programme, we've actually seen in the last week ministers really sharpening up their discourse about President Trump. We saw Wes Streeting on the Trevor Phillips show on Sunday morning on Sky using some very strong language, saying that his comments were outrageous. We've got Rachel Reeves on the front pages of the papers sort of expressing anger about the cost of the conflict for the UK. So I think because we're in local election mode, and British politicians know that the British public are not big fans of Donald Trump at the moment, they are actually being quite strident in some of the rhetoric they're using about him.
Yes, and so the British government obviously butting up against Donald Trump's administration over Iran. One of the issues of the broader conflict is Lebanon. And in a moment, we will have the latest on the first direct talks between Israel and Lebanon in 30 years. First of all, then, let's take a look at why those talks are taking place. 33 children were killed and more than 150 injured in last Wednesday's airstrikes by Israel on Lebanon. And our special correspondent, Alex Crawford, reports now on the youngest and most vulnerable victims of this war.
She moves her fingers as she recognises her nurse's voice. But with nearly half her body burned in an Israeli airstrike, any movement at all is painful. Her name is Zainab. She's only 12, and her entire family was killed in the same attack she barely survived. She still doesn't know that her parents and 2 young siblings have all been killed. Her brother was 5. Her baby sister wasn't quite 2 years old. Zainab constantly asks for her mother. Her only 2 visitors are her aunt and uncle, and they can't bring themselves to tell her the brutal truth right now.
All civilian. They bomb. Why? No one knows. They're not fighting. It doesn't have any bomb. It doesn't make any bad thing for anyone. If I was in our house, she's alone. She's alone. We are the only family. This is very bad issue. Yeah. I don't know what to say. It's very bad. This child, what she's fighting, she have rockets or bomb, or 2 years, or they are inside the house. They are not fighting inside. They want to do something to fight inside. Don't make this civilian attack. Don't attack the civilian. We are civilians.
The sole survivor in just one family affected is still critically ill and not out of danger yet.
Yes, that is a very powerful piece from Alex, and you can see all of that by scanning the QR code on your screen and watch it too on our YouTube channel and our app. But in Washington today, there have been talks, and indeed talks about talks. Little hope of an immediate ceasefire between Israel and the Iran-backed militant group Hezbollah. The Israeli and Lebanese ambassadors were at the talks, not Hezbollah, of course, which were the first direct negotiations between the nations since 1993. And while there was no agreement to end the fighting, there was some positivity, with Israel claiming both sides were united in their words, liberating Lebanon from Hezbollah. Well, our US correspondent Mark Stone spoke to the Israeli ambassador to the US after the meeting, who praised both Trump and Netanyahu for the change they've brought to the region.
That's the change that President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu have brought across the region. With the degrading of Iran, this malign and malignant entity that's trying to destabilize the entire region, there is now the opportunity to degrade its proxies as well, to move them out of their horrific occupation of another country, and to move into an era where Lebanese and Israelis can live side by side in peace. And yes, vacation in each other's countries. It's not a pipe dream. It's a reality that can really happen in our lifetime.
But when will you stop? When will you cease fire? When will you stop fighting in Lebanon? When will you stop firing missiles at the Lebanese civilian infrastructure? I guess that's their question.
I want to push back on your question. Okay. Israelis don't wake up in the morning and look to fire missiles across the border. The missiles are being fired at our civilians. That will be put a stop to. We will not allow a terror organization to continually fire missiles into our population centers.
Yes, and the problem, obviously, for the Lebanon government right now is it looks like Israel wants a permanent buffer zone on the border of northern Israel, and a potentially temporary one up to the Litani River, what, about 20 kilometres in or 20 miles in, which obviously is unacceptable to the Lebanese, and how they disarm Hezbollah has long been an issue of difficulty.
Absolutely. I mean, there are people who live in that zone, so what's going to happen to them? And there are Lebanese people who've been displaced before by this sort of action from Israel. I think the question is, there's no question, Hezbollah are a terrorist organisation like Hamas. Of course, they pose a threat to Israel. They are, they are launching strikes and attacks on Israel. The question is, what is the best way of diffusing that threat? A threat that is supported. I mean, they are a proxy of Iran, so it all ties into what's going on across the region. The difficulty with what we're seeing at the moment, and for me, there are real echoes about some of the conversations that we've been having about Gaza. Israel is saying, well, we've got to target Hezbollah, and, they distribute themselves amongst civilians, so we can't help but hit civilians when we're targeting Hezbollah. But we're seeing the real human cost of that. We're seeing children, women losing their lives, and there are real questions about, it's different to Gaza in the sense that in Lebanon, you've got a government that was elected in January 2025 that says they want to tackle Hezbollah as well, and they are willing to work with partners to sort of make that happen. And Israel's not been engaged in talks with them yet to date. We've only just seen that happen. So I really feel that there is Netanyahu does not really, he's in a coalition with far-right extremist Israeli politicians who are extremely gung-ho about territory in Lebanon, for example. And there are real questions about Netanyahu and his apparent inability to exercise self-restraint in these situations. And there's a lot of talk about, whether it's him who sort of goaded Trump into taking action in Iran, even though Israel is a junior partner to the US. So I think it's really worrying.
There's also a big question as to whether Israel's policy of using force can end these problems once and for all. I mean, this is not the first time that there have been Israeli incursions into Lebanon, and Hezbollah has grown up again, just as, in spite of everything that happened in Gaza, there are still parts of Gaza where Hamas is in control. So the use of force is something that Netanyahu believes in, but it does not deliver and has not delivered the ends he wanted, which is making Israel safe from attack.
Yes, and in terms of Iran's proxies, we're talking here about Hezbollah in Lebanon, there are real concerns now being expressed about the Houthis and the potential they have to close the very narrow entrance to the Red Sea, through which most of our goods from Asia and, the other parts of the Middle East would flow through, obviously, up the Suez Canal. So, I mean, Iran's it's not done yet in terms of its proxies.
Well, yeah, I think there's some question. There have been heavy attacks on the Houthis and quite...
How disabled they are is what you're asking.
What capability they have, I think remains a question, because they are, in this war, the dog that hasn't barked as yet.
And one other development tonight as well is from the US Treasury Department, which is that there was a temporary lifting of sanctions on Iranian oil supplies to allow the free flow of oil around the globe. It was 30 days. That will not be renewed, we're hearing tonight. And I suppose there's no point renewing it because they're now trying to blockade the Strait of Hormuz through which that Iranian oil would flow. So there would be, no point having those sanctions lifted. But that's just one other development on the Strait of Hormuz. We'll come on to the economic implications, certainly, of that, because we've had warnings that the UK is underprepared for war while taking the biggest hit to growth of the world's advanced economies. We will discuss both those points next.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist...
My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off and make a statement.
What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty.
War isn't pretty.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Now, the former Defence Secretary and NATO chief, Lord Robertson, has warned the UK is under-prepared for war, accusing the government of corrosive complacency when it comes to defence spending. He said tonight the country's national security is in peril and Britain cannot be defended with an ever-expanding welfare budget.
There is a corrosive complacency today in Britain's political leadership. Lip service is paid to the risks, the threats, the bright red signals of danger. But even the promised national conversation about defence can't be started. The cold reality of today's dangerous world is that we cannot defend Britain with an ever-expanding welfare budget.
So there is the Daily Mail. We cannot defend Britain with an ever-expanding welfare bill. This is the man who wrote the Defence Strategic Review. They're waiting now for the money, basically, for the investment programme to come forward.
That's right. And there have been a lot of critics of the government, you know, former chiefs of defence staff, etc., saying the government hasn't got concrete enough plans around defence spending. But this is a former Labour minister now, former Secretary-General of NATO coming out and say, Lord Geoffrey Robertson, I got his name wrong last hour, Robinson, but Lord Geoffrey Robertson, and it's serious. You know, this is a very serious player in the defence debate about defence. And I think the government...
It's George,
yes.
George, I'm really getting two different people.
Yes, and I was sitting there going, I'm sure it's George.
Geoffrey Robinson
and
is
George
the QC,
Lord,
and
former
George
Lord
Robertson.
I'm very glad you corrected me. Thank you, Adam. You're my saviour.
Let's just call him Lord Robertson.
Yeah, Lord Robertson. That is the safest way to do it. Absolutely. And actually, he is alighting on welfare, rather, as an example of where he's saying, look, the Labour government couldn't even follow through on plans to cut welfare spending. So where are they going to get the money from this for this defence spending? You know, that was a debate about disability benefits, and I actually agreed with the Labour MPs who opposed it. That was going to hit some people who genuinely couldn't work with disabilities very hard. That's why Labour MPs rebelled. But there are other sources you could look for this funding from the welfare bill. For example, the pension triple lock, which is very expensive. It was needed for a time. I think it served its purpose. But no politician wants to say, well, look at the increasing amount we're spending on state pensions. Maybe some of that should go to defence. So he's got a point about politicians not being willing to take tough decisions about trade-offs.
I mean, this is about priorities and how your priorities change with changing global circumstances. We have a war in Europe, in Ukraine. We've got a war in the Middle East. So at what point does this need to happen, Adam?
Well, it's the Daily Mail's that's made this equivalence between welfare spending.
Well, no, it's Lord Robertson who's made the equivalence, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but and I think he, you know, for all that you say that there are worthy recipients of welfare, I think you can argue that there's some areas where things are out of control and they're set to balloon. And of course, it has to be cuts to the welfare bill because the welfare bill and health take up such a large amount of government spending. I mean, I think the bill is annual spending on defence is about 60 billion, annual spending on welfare is 5 times as much, 300 billion. So, you know,
which includes
the state pension.
You know, the state pension, which is a big thing. So let's just go to the Times quickly, because we're going to run out of time on this section. They talk about the Sky News story from this morning, that actually defence chiefs are being told they need to make cuts for this financial year of 3.5 billion at a time when they need to spend more money. And actually, Adam, they're suggesting that the Chancellor has outlined what money defence will get, even though there seems to be a funding gap of about 28 billion over the next four years.
And she's offering 10 billion. So there's still going to be an 18 billion shortfall, which will mean cuts.
OK. Well, in response to the story in The Times, which included, as I said, Sky News' reporting, a government spokesperson said we have delivered the largest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War, taking the total investment to more than 270 billion across this parliament. We are finalising our defence investment plan that we will publish as soon as possible. It was expected, I think, last autumn, wasn't it? Rebuilding British industry to make defence an engine for growth and doubling down on our own commitment to NATO. But we still wait for that.
Exactly. I mean, that's a statement of the facts. The point about what George Robertson and other colleagues, Fiona Hill and former Chief Defence Staff Barons did, was they were asked to do a strategic defence review, and they produced it. It was supported by Keir Starmer, and they basically said, this is what we need to be defending, need to be spending on our defence if we are to defend ourselves in future. And Keir Starmer said, yeah, good idea, but he's not coming up with the money.
OK, well, Lord Robertson calling for more military funding. There's been a warning from the IMF today that the energy shock from the Iran war will hit the UK the hardest of all the world's advanced economies, with a prolonged conflict risking a global recession.
The UK is highly reliant on gas for its energy mix. Now, a lot of this gas is produced domestically, but there is still a part of it that is imported, and the part that is imported is at market prices. It's much more expensive, and that kind of sets the price for energy in the UK, in an environment in which gas reserves are relatively low when you compare them to other European countries. So there is more of a pass-through, if you want, of gas prices into wholesale prices of energy. The UK economy still has a negative output gap in our estimate, so there is quite a bit of slack, and that actually is moderating some of the wage pressures. Now, we'll have to see and watch how the increase in energy prices, especially when they get to consumers, whether that translates into a different dynamic. But right now, there is little evidence that there are strong wage pressures in the UK economy, and therefore, under the reference forecast, our estimates of core inflation are not increasing too much.
So there's the front page of The Guardian on this story. Iran conflict could spark a recession, with Britain hit hardest in the G7, so a global recession. But why is Britain specifically, you know, at risk, vulnerable to this shock?
Because Britain is vulnerable in 3 ways. It's vulnerable because at the moment inflation is higher than it should be, and one of the highest rates of inflation in the G7. We've also got the highest cost of borrowing in the G7 for the government. And then the kicker at the end is the British economy is more dependent on oil and gas coming from the Gulf. Therefore, when the price goes up, that has more of an impact on our economy. So it has been a boast of government ministers that Britain was on course to have the highest growth in the G7 because of the rate at which it was recovering from COVID. And basically what the IMF have done today is knock that one on the head. They said you're not going to have growth of over 1%, you're going to have growth below 1%. And that puts Britain pretty much in the middle of the pack within the G7. So it's one boast that Rachel Reeves has lost, on top of not being able to deliver improvements in the cost of living and not being able to deliver the sort of growth.
This is the front page of the. So I didn't mean to interrupt. This is the front page of the Eye. UK economy takes a triple hit from the Iran war. Adam, in the last hour, suggested that after the May elections, Rachel Reeves will lose her job because of what, Adam, specifically? Before I put it.
Well, because I think Labour will need a fairly dramatic reset, and the biggest block on that reset is Rachel Reeves at the moment as the Chancellor, you know, in the defence area, in the area of trying to find some more flexibility in the economy.
Yeah. Do you think she will lose her job?
I think there's a good chance of that. I think Adam is right. I think the issue for Labour is at the next election, the primary thing it's going to be about, as elections always are when the economy isn't doing great, is how people are feeling and how much money they've got left at the end of the month. And the problem for Labour is it came to into government saying, vote for us, we will grow the economy, and that will generate lots more tax revenue, and we'll also sort out public services, including the NHS. And that hasn't happened yet. And in fact, it looks like it's going to be harder for that to happen. You know, don't forget, when Labour came to government, living standards have been stagnant for almost 20 years. And I don't think it's all the government's fault. I think there's a lot that is outside the government's control in terms of the Iran conflict, the impact that that's going to have on inflation. But in many ways, it doesn't matter because voters will blame the government anyway. And this is a really toxic political cocktail for Labour, I think, going into the next election. They were desperately hoping that some growth was going to kind of magically arrive on the scene and save them ahead of the next general election. And now I think it looks like things could well get worse.
Yeah, let's go back to The Guardian if we can. And I'm going to jump ahead, and I'm jumping ahead to looking at the papers in a bit. But it says, Trump says peace talks may restart in 2 days. There are some words from J.D. Vance, the US Vice President. It's quoted by Reuters. I don't yet know who he's actually talking to. We're trying to find out. He said, we are negotiating with Iran. He suggested that the ceasefire is holding, and then goes on to say Iranian negotiators wanted to make a deal. We feel good about where we are, and also says a lot of mistrust between the US and Iran, which cannot be solved overnight. So we'll get more detail on that, but we are negotiating with Iran. I don't know at what level, who he's talking to, but we'll certainly see. But certainly Donald Trump suggesting that the substantive main peace talks, we've already talked about Lebanon, Israel. Those talks took place at ambassadorial level in Washington. But the US president was speaking to a New York Post reporter who had gone to Islamabad for the first round of ceasefire talks over the weekend. And after an interview discussing prospects for negotiations, the reporter said the president called her back with an update. You should stay there in Islamabad, really, because something could be happening over the next 2 days, and we're more inclined to go there. So we'll see what happens with that.
I think what that really shows is that the Americans are really anxious to do a deal because they don't know what's going to happen next, which, of course, is the point that the Chancellor was making on the front of the Mirror, just saying, you know, you shouldn't start a war when you don't know why you started it or what you want to achieve.
We will come on to that in the papers. Hold on. Let's talk more in a moment. We'll just take a look at all of the front pages, first of all. Starting with the Daily Mail, carrying those words from Lord Robertson's warning that Britain can't defend itself with an ever-expanding welfare bill. Well, despite that, Rachel Reeves only plans to raise defence spending by £2.5 billion a year, reports The Times. So that's £10 billion over the next 4 years. Suggestion is there's a £28 billion black hole. That's the paper Adam was just talking about. No exit plan, no idea. That is the Mirror's splash tomorrow as the Chancellor, the paper says, blasts Donald Trump over the war in Iran. The Guardian reports on the global recession fears as the International Monetary Fund says the UK could be the hardest hit in the G7. The UK economy takes a triple hit from the Iran war. That, as you saw a moment ago, is the lead for the Eye. Wall Street bank earnings shatter records as traders thrive on Iran war volatility. Volatility even is the lead for the Financial Times. The Telegraph says Labour is set to lose control in the Welsh Senate. Come on to that one. The Express calls on the Prime Minister to do more for emergency workers injured in the line of duty. The Metro quotes the boss of the Royal Ballet and Opera thanking actor Timothée Chalamet for saying no one cares about the two art forms. Apparently the backlash was so widespread it has done wonders for ticket sales. Who Wants to Be a Billionaire? That is on the front of The Sun as plans for a mega jackpot are revealed. And then let's take a look at the front page of the Daily Star, which has a story about sex positivity in Westminster. So, should we move to the... we've just talked about it. Trump says talks may restart in 2 days. There's words of J.D. Vance that I was quoting. In the meantime, let's go to the double-page spread in the Times, shall we? And this is about the blockade, their blockade, the American blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Everybody's been monitoring where the ships are going, who's edged forward, who's retreated. And the suggestion from the Americans is that no ships have passed our 10,000-strong force in the Gulf.
Yeah, there are sort of mixed reports because we've also heard from other analysts that, you know, a tiny handful might have got through, like 8 or something. I mean, the upshot is, when you take a step back from this, is that there used to be hundreds of ships that pass through every day carrying goods, including oil, and that isn't happening anymore. And that is the fact that the US is doing this shows there isn't going to be any quick resolution to this crisis. And as the IMF have been saying, and we've just been discussing, it's going to have knock-on impacts all over the world. Coming back to these negotiations and what J.D. Vance is saying about them, I totally agree with Adam. The US wants a deal. It's in its own interests because this is going to have big impacts politically, not just here in the UK, but in the US. Donald Trump did not get elected on a platform of launching international action against Iran. He got elected on a cost of living platform, and actually this is going to hurt his electoral chances in the US as well. So no wonder the US is keen for a deal. The issue is I think that the US intervention has left the US and indeed the West in a weaker position in relation to Iran, because it is illustrated to Iran what a big, significant bargaining chip they've got in terms of their control of the Straits of Hormuz.
Yes, and J.D. Vance just finding out, speaking to Turning Point USA at the University of Georgia. So there we go. They mentioned on the bottom of the Times here this fear that the Houthis may now try to disrupt another maritime route. This is right at the bottom of the Red Sea, the Bab al-Mandeb area, you know, which is... There's an east-west pipeline across Saudi Arabia if you're trying to circumvent the Strait of Hormuz, which could then be jeopardised by the Houthis, another Iranian proxy, you know, trying to close that very narrow entry to the Red Sea.
Yeah, I mean, this appears to be what the Americans didn't see when they launched this attack, or indeed the Israelis in their discussion, that there would be a tactical response by Iran and its proxies to threaten the the flow of oil in the region. I mean, a lot of people say it was pretty obvious, but it apparently wasn't obvious to those people who thought that they would launch some bombs and the regime would fall in a matter of days, which is what we understand from the New York Times. Netanyahu told the situation room in the White House.
Very interesting. And in the meantime, the Daily Mirror, you've already mentioned this. This is Rachel Reeves, who's now coming out actually quite forcefully against Trump's lack of planning and outcome for the Iran war.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a missive that's gone around Whitehall to ministers. Certainly, we've seen a strengthening of language from ministers over the last week. We saw Wes Streeting on Sunday on the Trevor Phillips programme, you know, say that Donald Trump's comments about Iran that week had been outrageous. We're now seeing these very strong words from Rachel Reeves saying she's angry at the costs of this conflict and the impact it's going to have on the UK. Indeed, we even saw Keir Starmer yesterday at the start of this week. He was using stronger language around Trump as well. And I think, well, first of all, I think the government will genuinely be feeling quite exasperated at President Trump. But I also think it's got one eye to the local elections. Donald Trump is not popular with British voters. And I think the government know it's got to start sort of...
So this is politicking, is
I think, not wholly, but I think the government will be aware that by using strong words about Donald Trump, they will not necessarily be hurting themselves in the polls.
She can blame the lack of growth in this country now in the Iran war.
Well,
the quotes in The Guardian, Adam. The war in Iran is not our war, but it will come at a cost to the UK. These are not costs I wanted, but they are costs we will have to respond to.
Yeah, I mean, you can't blame her. She didn't start this war. And if it, as we've been discussing, is having a very adverse effect on the British economy, she will obviously want to say it's not my fault, it's Donald Trump's fault, particularly at a time when the relationship clearly between Starmer and Donald Trump has broken down now that he's been called No Churchill. The problem is that, yeah, Trump's unpopular, but in the end, people tend to hold their own government to account for the state of the economy rather than external factors.
Indeed.
Yeah. OK, well, it takes us to the May elections on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, which is their focus on Wales, which feels historic. Labour set to lose control in Wales, the Telegraph is reporting.
Yeah, and Wales has long been a stronghold for Labour.
Always.
More, always. Far more than Scotland, you know, where we've seen the SNP running the Scottish government since 2007. This would be really, really seismic. And this is a new poll that suggests that Labour is set to lose control of the Welsh Assembly, of the Senedd to Clyde. But it's not the only sort of seismic thing we're going to see, because there's lots of polling that suggests that in England, areas that have historically always been Labour, we are going to see some of those go to Reform. We're going to see some of those go to Green as well. I think the one certainty about the local elections and the Welsh and Scottish elections is it's going to be a bit of a bloodbath for Labour.
Nigel Farage is certainly feeling quite chipper about Wales. He's been speaking to our political editor, Beth Rigby, and bullish, as I say, about their chances in those Welsh elections. Let's listen.
In Wales, well, we're neck and neck. Right now, literally neck and neck with Plaid in those polls. The Labour Party, particularly in the valleys, you know, Keir Hardie, real birthplace of the Labour Party, almost disappearing off the map. So, to be frank, coming first in Wales is the ambition. Whether we can remains to be seen.
And saying to Beth, the ambition is to come second in Scotland. Anyway, this is fascinating, isn't it?
It is. I mean, this poll is quite similar to one that was in the Sunday Times at the weekend. And, you know, the figures are in the 96-member Senedd. It believes that Plaid would come first with 33 of the seats, followed by Reform with 29, and then Labour in third place with 17. Now, I mean, what's interesting about that is that's not quite neck and neck, but it's perhaps getting on the way. And we did, of course, have that Senedd by-election where Reform thought they were going to win, and actually it turned out that Plaid won. But, you know, this is one of the issues that we're going to have in many councils, and potentially, if things stay the same in the general election, of an absolutely split vote, so you end up with minority governments or coalitions almost everywhere because no one is in a majority. And Labour has this history, certainly in Wales, of being in a majority, as it did in Scotland until the rise of the SNP.
Yeah, and so just to reiterate, if Labour lost, it would be the first time since devolution, which is why, you know, it makes very interesting.
There's also a suggestion that the leader of Labour in Wales, Leonard Morgan, is on course to lose her seat.
Yeah. Interesting times ahead, and certainly well worth watching. Special programme with Jonathan Samuels overnight that night, and I'll be on for the wrap just before when the polls close. But anyway, let's go to the Sussexes, making a big budget return to Oz. Some great photos in the papers.
Yeah, this is right. So they're on a tour of Australia. It sort of takes us back to the time when they would have been doing state visits on behalf of the British royal family. But the big difference between then and now is this is a privately funded trip. That's a sort of euphemistic way of saying that I think the Sussexes are hoping to make a fair bit of money from it. So they are charging, Harry is charging to give a speech. Meghan, we heard, this is very good intel from Adam, is charging for people to come and spend time with her on a wellness day. So it's not quite the same sort of trip that we would have seen them make a decade ago.
The Times has got the details of the charges. Harry is speaking at a corporate Inter-Edge Summit conference in Melbourne, and to be there in person will cost you over £1,000, £1,250. But you can get a virtual ticket, which presumably allows you to log in and watch it online for the bargain price of £260. Oh. Meanwhile, the Her Best Live retreat at Coogee Beach on Saturday, tickets for that weekend with Meghan cost £1,680. That's over 3,000 Australian dollars.
It's fascinating stuff, isn't it? As he picks up a little bit of eucalyptus and has a little smell. It's a lovely smell. But anyway, we'll follow that trip. In the meantime, lottery changes. The new people running the lottery have decided to increase the number of millionaires and also tie in with American lottery producer that's not the right word, is it? For a £1 billion plus prize up for grabs.
Well, I guess it's one way of dealing with the cost of living, buy a lottery ticket and just hope. The chances, obviously, of becoming a millionaire through the lottery are very remote, but they are going up.
Exactly. That's exactly the point.
Because apparently they're going up from something like, I think it was 140 millionaires a year to 345 lotto millionaires a year. So, I mean, I'd say, given the number of lottery tickets sold, the chances of you sorting out your cost of living crisis with a win are still small, but you never know.
The figure I've heard quoted is 1 in 14 million. Is your
yes.
What is it now? Isn't it 1 in... Oh,
I think that's what it was when I remember that from their launch. I still remember watching the first ever national lottery. It was on New Year's Eve in the early 90s, I think.
Right, we've got not long left, and we've got 3 stories. Oh, 20 seconds. Oh, my goodness me, that's going to be tough, isn't it? I'm going to jump to the Metro. Cheers, Timmy. Boost in ballet and opera ticket sales after the movie star claims no one cares about it. It was widely seen as damaging his Oscars hopes as well, wasn't it? So,
yeah, well, there was that joke from Conan O'Brien about security being tightened because of fears of attacks by the ballet and opera communities. This is Alex Beard, the chairman of the Opera House in this country, saying actually since then there's been more interest from young people in getting tickets. And I have to say I was at the opera with Alex Beard at a sponsored thing for young people under 30, only 30 quid for every seat in the house.
Got to go. Right, thank you both very much indeed. Lots more still to come. We'll have the sport back in a moment.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Over there, to your left. There have been airstrikes every day. Hezbollah are very sensitive about us showing any pictures, and we're being hurried away right now. It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon. Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes. Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
It's trying to hit us. That's it. It got us then.
There's a lot of action going on. A lot of hits coming in still. We were the first journalists and the only outsiders to reach the site of the attack several weeks after it happened.
We found from the missile.
It's very difficult to see what around here could be conceived of as a legitimate military target.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, a boat seriously overcrowded.
This is one of the most severe viruses in the world. Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa!
Getting up close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her. It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect.
Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Well, it is time for the spot now. Here's David.
John will, talks about it as the best medical he ever failed. It seems strange you get so far down the line and a player of his calibre, the possibility of signing him, it would have been a massive threat had he signed for Rangers, but thankfully he didn't.
It's very, very seldom you see a player in the building walking around at a club and the deal isn't done, but historically Rangers have been stung a couple of times signing players who had glitches, you might say, in the medical. Famously Daniel Prodan was one a number of years earlier, but there had been others as well, and I think they'd reached the stage where they weren't going to take any more risk.
And then I failed a medical at Charlton.
John Hartson was last week tipped to be on his way across South London for £5 million. But for the time being, that seems a dead deal.
Been a lot of speculation, and if there was any chance, it would have been done.
Spent the day with Alan Kirbishley, walking around the valley and being in the training ground. And I was training every day. I was scoring goals every weekend. And I'm thinking to myself, I can't pass a medical because of this knee.
I'm not bitter, no, not at all. I'm not a bitter person, I just get on with life. I've got no problems with my knee or nothing, I'm lashing balls in and everything else. And it does get a bit, frustrating at times. People keep going on about medicals and that. So that does unsettle me a little bit.
I shouldn't think you want to see another one again, do you?
No, I don't. I don't want to do any more medicals, to be honest.
So I'm starting to question myself. I think my previous managers were saying, John's fine. He's doing everything asked of him on the training ground. He's playing every week. He's scoring goals. But for some reason, I just couldn't pass this medical. And it was very, very frustrating. It was quite worrying, actually. I'm starting to think, well, where do I go from here?
As transfer soap operas go, this one was beginning to rival Coronation Street. Wimbledon have waived their £5 million fee. The Sky Blues will pay every time the Welsh international pulls on their shirt.
He's had injuries, but if you look at his record of playing, he plays a lot of games.
It's all about pressure, this game, anyway. If you can't handle pressure, you're in the wrong game.
I actually failed the medical first time around at Coventry, but it was Gordon Strachan that pushed it forward and obviously did the deal.
We tried to buy John from Wimbledon a few months before, but then Rangers came in. John failed the medical. We went back to Wimbledon, ended up doing a deal with Wimbledon to buy John for $750,000. I trusted Gordon implicitly. If Gordon felt strongly enough and he'd got a commitment out of John, that John knew his own body, he'd certainly not miss games for the sake of his knee.
Coventry City
And now to the weather.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
Well, the next few days will bring widespread showers or more general rain, but it will turn warmer. The weekend should bring something more settled. Most places then will have a very mild and murky start tomorrow with outbreaks of rain, especially in the north and west. Britain will see patchy light rain giving way to heavier, more prolonged rain in the west through the morning. Further east, it'll stay rather cloudy with a little rain in places, but some bright spells will develop. Meanwhile, Ireland and Northern Ireland will see sunshine and showers once persistent early rain clears the east. Warmer overall. The afternoon then, seeing heavy rain becoming increasingly showery as it clears across Britain. Sunshine and more scattered showers will follow from the west, some heavy with the risk of hail and thunder. Thursday will bring further showers, but there will be sunny spells too.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Well, that was the wrap. Thank you for watching. We will have all the top stories coming up right here on Sky News, including more details about the state visit by the King and Queen to the US.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They will be allowed to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
We're trying to see as much as we can. We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting. The whole neighborhood has rallied around her. It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.